Okay. Hey, everyone. Are you ready? Okay, I'm ready too. So let's go. Okay, first, Susan wants me to tell you this is being recorded. So if you have questions, please go to the mic in the center of the room. And with that, I will get started. I'll wait for David to sit down. I'll be polite. Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to out you. Okay, so we're going to talk about life after IPv4 depletion. My name is Leslie Nobile. I think many of you know me as the Director of Registration Services. That was my old job. Now I have a new job at ARIN, and I am the Senior Director of Global Registry Knowledge, and my focus is more on data integrity and data quality. So basically we're going to talk about what happens as we deplete our IPv4 supply at ARIN and afterwards. How will you get resources to grow your business? So we're going to start by talking about ARIN's current IPv4 inventory. I have several slides about that. And then we're going to talk about some trends and observations that we're seeing at ARIN, basically related to IPv4 requests, IPv6 requests, and transfer requests. And then we'll go sort of into the meat of the presentation and talk about ways to obtain IP addresses in a post IPv4 depletion world. What are you going to do once we're out and as we near run out? And obviously we're going to focus on IPv4 and transfers and IPv6. So, a little IPv4 reality check. Where do we stand right now? Well, ARIN has already depleted some of our larger prefix sizes. We have no /8s right now, no /9s, no /10s, and I don't believe we'll be getting any in the near future, although you never know. Sometimes people do return space. We expect to deplete to the /16 level in the near future. I'm going to show you a slide in a little bit later that shows how many prefixes we have left, and there's very few between a /11 and a /16. So those will run out as some of the larger requesters come in and get that space. Once we hit that /16 level, there's not that many /16s either, we're going to quickly work our way to the /24 level, and that's all that's going to remain at ARIN. And I will tell you that at ARIN right now, we mostly issue /24s. That is the majority of what we're issuing to customers right now, the very small allocation and assignment sizes. Eventually, there really won't be any blocks in our available inventory. There'll only be blocks in our reserved inventory, and those are for specific policies. So we will get to a point where we are at 0. The other RARs have policies like austerity policies, and they have last/8 policies, which limits the amount of space they can issue, but ARIN doesn't have a policy like that, so we are going to issue right down to the very end. And we're getting close. So this is what our current V4 inventory looks like. We have 0.24/8 equivalents in our available inventory. Now that is space that is clear, clean, ready to go, ready to be issued. It's what we issue from on a daily basis. We also have what we call other inventory, and that is not clean and clear space. And there's sort of two categories. We have what we call quarantine space, and I've talked about this previously. This is the space that we get back through revocations and returns. And we typically put that on a 60-day hold so it clears filters. So we check, make sure it's not being routed and everything's good. And that's one way of keeping it clean and ready to issue. And once it gets past the 60-day mark, it typically moves back into the available inventory. If it is being routed, we have always checked before we put it into available inventory. And if it is being routed, we actually put it back at the bottom of the pile and we don't issue it. But we're running out, and so at some point really soon, we're probably going to have to start issuing the space that is being routed. Even though it's being routed, we're going to work on getting it unrouted before we issue it, but we can't promise anything. So right now, in that quarantine space, we have about 19/16 equivalents. It sounds like a lot of space. We typically have between 8 and 10/16 equivalents in there, but we moved some space out of the current inventory that we hadn't done full research on. It was space that had been returned to us. We want to make sure that the space we're issuing has no disputes, no claims over it. We want to make sure we're issuing correctly. So we need to do a bit of research. So we put several of these /16 equivalents into quarantine, and we are starting our research project right now. We're going through them one by one to make sure they're clean, clear, we have a clear chain of custody, et cetera. Sorry, this is so small, I'm completely blind. Okay, so that's the quarantine space. The other part of our other inventory is our reserved space. And the reserved space is actually space we put on indefinite hold. That is not space that automatically gets released back into the available pool. And that is where the space that we hold for policies sits. So we have a /10 or 64/16s reserved for dedicated IPv4 block to facilitate IPv6 deployment. That policy says to hold aside a 10 just for IPv6 facilitation. We have issued one single /24 out of that policy thus far. We also have another policy where we're reserving space, a /16 we held originally for, let me just finish, for microallocations. And we have 218 /24s remaining in that block. And there's actually a policy that's going to be discussed this week that proposes to hold an additional /16 for microallocations, critical internet infrastructure. So you all will be discussing that, and it's possible that we'll take a /16 and put it into reserves, an additional /16 for this particular policy. Alain, did you have a question?
Yes, Alain Jean. When you say the /10 for dedicated v4 blocks to v6 deployment, and you break it down in 64/16, is it one contiguous block, or has it been broken down into many blocks?
That is actually one contiguous block. We reserved a full /10 for that.
Thank you.
However, now that you mention it, the microallocation block was not a contiguous /16. That was bits and pieces that we took of the smaller, the /24s, excuse me, 23s, 22s, because that's typically what we're issuing in microallocations. So we took a bunch of straggler space and put it together and made it a /16 for the microallocations. But we thought it was important to reserve a full /10 for the v6 deployment.
Sergio Rojas from Lagnic. For this space reserved for dedicated IPv4 block, what is the minimum and maximum allocation that you can give to organizations?
For the dedicated IPv6 block?
Yes.
The policy currently says the minimum allocation size is a /28, and the maximum is a /24. So we will typically be issuing /24s. And here comes Kevin. This is good. I like this. Interactive. This
Kevin
is good.
Bloomberg. And there's a policy currently on the list that does change it to only 24, and that's to be discussed.
Yeah. Because, 28 is kind of a, So, okay. So, in addition to the, sorry, Elvis, hi. This is going to be a long one, guys.
No, I'll keep it short. So what qualifies as IPv6 deployment? What would qualify in order to get space from there?
Basically, what you are using this /24 to facilitate your v6 services. And maybe someone from the AC, I think one of you guys is the one that proposed this, so maybe you could just briefly explain it. Owen?
Owen DeLong, Akamai. But speaking as myself, who actually did write the proposal for this space, the intent was to facilitate space for providers that were late to the game or whatever, and did not have any v4 space with which they could implement something like NAT64 or 464 XLAT or one of those mechanisms in order to be able to deploy their v6 network but still talk to the v4 world, because we all recognize that that's sort of going to be necessary much longer than we'd like it to be.
Thanks. Kevin?
As the author of the current proposal, one of the reasons behind it was in regards to routing for critical infrastructure, because that is one of the points is critical infrastructure that it could be used for that. So as an example, bootstrapping your DNS to have v4 support for your v6 infrastructure, things like that. So for critical infrastructure, it will be very important.
Right, thanks. Alain?
And again, as was a person who initiated the idea behind this proposal many years ago. So adding to what was said before, DNS is one of those very weird things that is absolutely critical. And we have one of the RFC, I can't remember the number on top of my head, but that essentially says that even if you operate in V6, you need to have V4 servers that are reachable for your DNS.
Right.
So this policy was really aimed at enabling that need, and also, as Owen mentioned, about any other hundreds of transition mechanisms that I unfortunately contributed to create in IETF that requires a little pool of V4 addresses.
Right.
And about the /28, at the time when the discussion happened, it was thought that it will be a contiguous block, hence my previous question to you. So that block will be publicized ahead of time so that service provider could update their filters. So they could accept longer than 24 for that particular prefix. So maybe a question back to you is this /10 prefix advertised, and do people know which one it is so that they can update their filters?
I'm not sure if it's advertised. I know that we've announced it before, but I don't, does it? It is on the website,
It's
okay.
on the website.
I know we announced it, so, okay, good.
Okay, thank you.
It's there, okay. All right, so we'll move on. Okay, besides the space we've retained for, reserved for policies, we have some other space, roughly 8/16 equivalents that we put on indefinite hold. And this is space that we reclaimed due to fraudulent activity. And I have another slide on this later, which I'll explain a little bit more about that. But and most of it was legacy space, and we need to do further chain of custody research on that to make sure that there's no successor companies. I mean, we did our research, but we want to be triple sure, so we're holding on to it, and that's part of our research project where we're going to go through all of this before we release it back into our available inventory. So this is also on our website. This is our current IPv4 prefix inventory, and you can see we've got the single/11, single/12, and we've got 668/24s. And the last time I did this presentation at the ARIN meeting, we had roughly 1,200/24s, and that was about 6 months ago. So they are going very regularly out the door, very quickly. So I want to talk about the extended FTP stats. I'm not sure all of you know about this. I know a lot of our researchers know about this, but this is a very good way of tracking ARIN's full IP resource inventory. You can see everything we have, and you can see it, in fact, for all 5 of the RIRs, because this was a joint project, and all 5 of us provide this. And we do it for accountability and transparency. We want to make sure everyone knows what each of the RIRs have, and we want to know what we all have as well. So it really shows which RIR is responsible for which resources. And it also identifies, it's a way to identify inconsistencies and overlaps, which previously we had some. There were some. And with this project, we straightened them all out. We worked together. We found out, what the issues were, and we corrected them. On occasion, very rare occasion, there is an overlap that we see. It's very short-lived, and it's typically due to an inter-RIR transfer between ARIN and APNIC. Sometimes with the timing, because they're 15 hours ahead, it's just a timing issue. So, one RIR has to take it out of the database, and the other has to put it in, and we time that. So it's a very short-lived overlap, if anybody ever notices. So anyway, it is a daily snapshot of all ARIN issued resources. There's 3 categories. You can see all the issued resources, you can see all of the available resources, and then you can see all of the reserved resources. So it shows you the complete picture. So just a couple of notes about that. On the previous slide, or 2 slides ago, I talked about the other inventory, and that was the reserved inventory and the quarantine inventory. All of that space shows up as reserved in the extended FTP stats. So the quarantine space and the reserved space all shows as reserved. And another thing to note is that 8.3 transfers, they show up as issued in the extended FTP stats, but 8.2 transfers, those are merger and acquisition transfers, the ones we've always been doing. They do not show up because they retain their original registration date, so they're not going to show up as issued in the extended FTP stats, and that was a business decision that we made. And so 8.2s retain that original date. The link is right there if anyone's interested, but it really is a good way. A lot of people just go to the current inventory, and it really doesn't show you anything except what's free and clear and available, and it's not an accurate picture. So I would recommend checking the extended FTP stats if you're really interested in knowing everything that we have. So, can ARIN's IPv4 free pool increase? I mean, as we get down to nothing, is there a chance that it'll go back up to something? Yeah, there's a chance. There's 4 ways that v4 addresses come back into ARIN's free pool. We get returns, and those are voluntary, and we accept them gladly, and we still get them. And people really doubt that we still get them because there is a monetary value to them now, but we do get them. There are good netizens, and they want to give back their space. A lot of times it happens during the course of a merger and acquisition transfer where they're moving space from one company to another, and they have too much and they don't need it, so we get it back. We do revocations. Now, that's typically for non-payment of registration fees. We have a very long, involved revocation process. We give people 6 months before we actually revoke, and we give numerous messages, phone calls, certified mail, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it's a very long process, and so by the time we get to the end of the 6 months, we will do a revoke. We'll revoke the space. And at some point, we do get space back. A lot of times people catch it just toward the end, just before they're revoked permanently, but a lot of times they don't. So that is another way to get space back into the inventory. We have reclaimed space due to fraud or business dissolution, and we have people sending us fraud reports quite often, and a lot of times they'll say, this company is, first of all, or this company is providing you with fraudulent information. So we research that, and we do a serious investigation to see what kind of information they're giving us. And there have been occasions where we have reclaimed that type of space. And then business dissolution, we also get fraud reports or reports from people saying, or we find out ourselves, that a company is completely out of business, gone, no successor company. So we will reclaim space. And that's the space we like to hold on to just to make sure that it is really clean and clear, and that's the space that really requires some serious research. The 4th way that we get space back is IANA issued space. So we all know IANA ran out of space in February of 2011. The global pool's gone. But IANA has gotten some space back into their pool from the RIRs. 3 of us, RIPE, APNIC, and ARIN, returned 1.2/8 equivalents to the IANA a couple of years ago. The space that we had gotten returned to us, we gave to IANA. So there is a policy, a global policy, which means all 5 of us utilize the same policy, called Post-Exhaustion IPv4 Allocation Mechanisms by IANA. And this allows IANA to issue the 5 RIRs equal amounts of space twice per year. And the size of the blocks can be smaller than the /8. Previously, IANA could only issue the RIR /8s, but now that there are no /8s, they can issue smaller blocks. So we have received to date 3 allocations from them. Our first one was a /11 in May of 2014. Our second one was a /12, and we got that in September of 2014. And we just recently, in March, got a /13, each one of us. And I know that there's more space there, so we'll get another allocation or 2 at least. And maybe more space will go back to IANA. I'm not sure, but hopefully. And I mentioned, let's see, okay, 3.54 total /8s recovered by ARIN since 2005. So roughly 10 years. That includes space that was returned, revoked, and a lot of it was returned, by the way. Revoked space and reclaimed space. It doesn't include IANA issued space. So 3.54/8 equivalents in about 10 years. That's a lot of space to come back. So, move on to trends and observations. Oh, Kevin has a question.
I just have a very quick question on, if you go back one slide. Under reclaim, I'll use an example. Corporation gets space from ARIN in 2008. You go to the government database and see in 2009 that corporation was dissolved. But you don't know if all of the assets of the corporation were transferred in 2008.
Right.
Is that dangerous space? Or is the idea that they haven't paid their ARIN dues since 2009 or whatever the case may be, therefore it would be revoked for non-payment? Like reclaim, I'm trying to understand the difference, I guess, between reclaim and revoke.
Revoked is always for non-payment of fees.
Okay.
Okay, that's a revocation process. You have violated the terms and conditions of your RSA, your Registration Services Agreement, and we go through that 6-month process. Reclamations are only due to fraudulent activity, fraud, right up fraud. They lied to us to get the space that they got. Or when we find out that a company is completely gone and out of business with no successor company. And that's the space that that whole no successor company, that's where we're, very careful.
So my question is, if there is no successor company, they would really fall under a revocation 12 months later when the original company hasn't paid or the new company hasn't
A
paid.
lot of this space is legacy space that gets reclaimed. It's old, it's been sitting in the database forever. The company was out of business in 2000. That's mostly what we see for the reclamations,
Okay.
unless it's fraud,
So if
and
it's-
that's different.
So going back to that, if it's legacy space, if somebody comes along with a magic bullet document showing that an asset was transferred, and you've already gone off and moved that to somebody else, that's problematic, correct?
So that's really, thank you for making my point. That is the whole reason we hold this space, because in case of disputes, that is why those 8/16 equivalents are sitting in reserved on indefinite hold until we can be 100% sure. That's why.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, moving on. And I didn't do this one, right? Oh, yeah. I did the title. Okay, so what are we seeing? What are the trends in IPv4 requests, IPv6 requests, and transfer requests? So I went back to 2011, which was when IANA ran out of their free pool. And I looked to see how many requests we had for IPv4, and you can see there were 2863. And every year since, that number has climbed, right? It keeps increasing. People are definitely getting their IPv4 address space from ARIN. But when you look to the next column at IPv6 requests, we had about 1,425 requests in 2011 in v6. That includes end users and ISPs. And then in 2014, it dropped to half of that amount, 710. And each year it has declined. I don't know what's going on, but it's clearly declining. And then you look at transfer requests, and we have seen an increase every year. It's not a huge increase yet, but we expect that increase to really bump up over the next year. So, Owen, what do you think? Tell us.
Owen DeLong, Akamai, ARIN AC. I think the IPv6 requests are probably going down due to the lack of slow start in the v6 policy, which is a good thing. The requests going down, not necessarily a good thing, but I think when you consider the unfortunately slow pace of adoption, combined with the fact that people that came and got IPv6 requests in 2011 and even earlier,
Yeah.
probably for the most part, I'm probably one of the few exceptions that's actually come back for a second request
Right.
as an additional
Right.
IPv6 allocation. Probably you aren't seeing too many repeat requests, and I'm willing to bet that a very high percentage of your v4 requests are not first-timers.
Well, a lot of our v4 requests are first-timers. That's with the new IPv4 policy with the /24 minimum allocation size. There's a lot of first-timers because a lot of upstream ISPs are telling their customers, we don't want to give you space anymore. Go get it from ARIN. We need to hold on to ours just in case we need it. So go to ARIN because you can qualify for your own 24 because it's easy. There's a policy for you. So we are getting a lot of first-timers in v4. But you are correct. We do not see many repeat requests in v6. I think we've had 1 or 2. So that is correct. Okay, so moving on. This is actually a good slide. Oh, and you will like this one. Most of you will. This shows our ISP members who have both IPv4 and IPv6. And we started tracking this, I just went back to 2010 Q1, and about 20% of our ISP members had IPv6 allocations directly from ARIN. Now when you look at the end of 2014, Q4, it shows that 47% of our ISP members have come in and gotten their IPv6 allocation. So it has increased, it is steadily growing, and that's encouraging. So this is sort of the meat of this presentation. What are your options for growing your network in a post-IPv4 depletion world? What are you going to do when ARIN's out of space? So there's options. I told you we'll get a bit of space back on occasion, and there's ways to get that space. So that's what we're basically going to talk about. So you would check that inventory pretty much on a daily basis to see if anything new has been added in. And then you can apply for resources. So if you go the IPv4 route, you still want to come in directly to ARIN, and you want to get resources and maybe get placed on a waiting list, and just in case something comes back or in case IANA issues another, allocation to us. So you wait. You can also use the IPv4 transfer market. That's your other option. Go out and find space. There's lots of IPv4 brokers out there to help you. There's lots of people who have space available. So you can look to do a 8.3 or 8.4 transfer, 8.3 being specified transfers, which we'll talk about in a later slide, 8.4 being inter-RIR transfers. And if you do use the market transfers, if you go for that option, there's a couple of sort of tools, services that can help you get ready in advance of the actual transfer. You can use the specified transfer listing service that ARIN offers, which I will talk about in a later slide. I'm not going to get into it on this one. That's a way to get pre-approved and get all ready for your transaction. Or you can get pre-approved through ARIN's pre-approval process for an 8.3 or 8.4 transfer. And that way you know exactly how much space you qualify for when you go out there looking for it. Let me just finish. Sure. Or you can request IPv6 addresses and just forget about IPv4 altogether. Yes, Owen.
So, Owen DeLong, when one is considering whether to be placed on the waiting list or not, is there going to be a way to find out how far down the waiting list you would be?
Oh, that's such a good question, and we knew people would be asking this, and it's extremely difficult for us to actually let you know where you sit. And we've tried to explore many options and many ways to do that, and at this point, we don't have a way. So if you have any ideas, talk to us later.
Hi,
Hey, Elvis.
Elvis before escrow. So, one of the ideas would be to actually tell someone, there's so much space that has been pre-approved and asked before you. So not giving names, not giving sizes. This is how much has been. This is how far you are down on the. There are 2 million IP addresses already pending allocation before you get yours. For example.
Right. Okay.
Now, I want to talk a bit about the market transfers. So if someone wants to, first come to ARIN, find out how much they can justify, get a pre-approval.
Mm-hmm.
The pre-approvals for 8.3 and 8.4 are different, right?
No, it's the same process.
They will be the same?
You know what? I have a slide on that.
Right.
Do you want me to can I just keep going and then?
Sure.
I might answer your question in that slide, I might not.
Actually, the question was, do you need a pre-approval also if you're transferring legacy through 8.3 or 8.4?
It's all the same at ARIN.
So also legacy? Okay.
Everything. You don't have to get a pre-approval, but you have to get a pre-approval if you're going to be on this specified transfer listing service. You can come in and get a pre-approval because that's a smart thing to do, but you don't have to. You can just come in and request your transfer, and then basically you're gambling to know whether you actually qualify for the amount of space you found. So that's why if you come in and get a pre-approval, you know exactly how much space you're approved for, and that's what you're going to be looking for out in the market.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So we're going to sort of walk through those things I just had on this previous slide. So here's how you check ARIN's inventory. This is like the no-brainer. It's listed and updated on our database every day. On our webpage every day. It gets updated at 12 a.m. And you can see it right down there on the right-hand side. And it'll tell you exactly what the total amount is in the available inventory. So you've checked it, and there's a bit of space in there, and you decide that you want to apply, and probably will have to go on a waiting list. So this is sort of how the waiting list works. It starts when ARIN cannot fill a qualified request. That means when someone comes in and gets approved for a /15 and ARIN doesn't have one, we have to actually initiate the option. We have to offer the option of going on a waiting list. So basically the pre-approved size is not in our inventory. So you can then specify a smaller acceptable block size. You can say, I'll accept anything, down to a /19. But I like the idea of a 15, but I'll go smaller if I have to. And if there isn't anything there, if there's no block between that approved size and the smallest acceptable size, then you have this option to go on the waiting list. and it's of pre-qualified recipients. So the way it will work is that the oldest request is going to be filled first, and that is based on the approval date, okay, the date that you receive an approval from ARIN. If, for example, ARIN gets a /16 block, and the oldest request is for a /24, even though there's several people approved for /16 somewhere in there, we're going to go to the oldest request, take a 24 out of that 16, break it up, give them that, and then fulfill any other successive requests in the order that they were approved date. You can only have one approved request on the waiting list at a time. And there's a limit of one allocation or assignment every 3 months per the policy. So if you come in and you're on the waiting list for a while and then you get your block, you come off the waiting list and you can't come back in and apply and get on the waiting list again for 3 months. There's just a waiting period. So, so you apply for V4, you go on the waiting list, but then you decide you're going to explore the market transfers. We have merger and acquisition transfers. We call them NERPM 8.2 transfers. They've been at ARIN since ARIN started. Those are just your classic merger and acquisition, legal documentation, et cetera, et cetera. We're going to just stick to the other two types of transfers, these specified transfers, transfers to specified recipients and inter-RIR transfers to specified recipients. They're both specified recipient policies. So transfers to specified recipients, which is NERPM 8.3, is a policy that allows organizations with unused IPv4 resources to transfer them to organizations in need of IPv4 resources. That's the basic premise. I'm just going to do a high-level sort of overview of what the criteria is. For the source, they must be the current registrant, and there can be no disputes over the validity or ownership, if you will, of the address space. And that is part of why ARIN does such a thorough vetting, and that's why we don't release space that we get back right away without thoroughly vetting and researching it. You must not have received addresses from ARIN for 12 months prior to the transfer request. You cannot have gotten space. And then you're ineligible to receive further addresses from ARIN for 12 months after the transfer is completed. And that's basically an anti-flipping measure. It is to prevent people from coming in, getting space, and immediately turning around and trying to sell it. Because obviously, this is a needs-based policy. You tell us, we still have IPv4 needs-based. You tell us you need it for a particular reason or a service, and then you go and get rid of it a month later. That means you really didn't tell us what you were doing with the space. So that's the anti-flipping clause. The recipient has to demonstrate need for a 24-month supply under current ARIN policy. And that's key here, 24-month supply. That's why we're seeing a lot of, we started seeing a lot of these 8.3 transfers fairly early on, because it allows ISPs to come in and get a 24-month supply of IPv4 addresses, whereas our typical ISP policy only allows them to come in and get a 3-month supply of addresses. So it's an attractive option for some companies. Inter-RIR transfers. The basic premise behind this is that whatever RIR we're dealing with in an inter-RIR transfer must have reciprocal, compatible, needs-based policies. That's stipulated in the policy. Right now, it's only APNIC that has an inter-RIR transfer policy that is compatible with ours, and that's where we do most of our transfers. That's where we do all of our inter-RIR transfers with. And to date, it's only been from ARIN to the APNIC region. RIPE NCC has just passed their own inter-RIR transfer policy, and that will be going into effect very soon. They're working on implementation. They're actually working with us quite a bit, with us and with APNIC. We've given them our procedures, and we're answering lots of questions for them because they want to make sure that their procedures are compatible with all of ours and that this all goes very smoothly. So we're working very closely together. Sorry. So, transfers from ARIN. Oh, Sandra, what's up?
Sandy Murphy
Sandy.
Parsons. The previous slide, when you said the intent was people had unused resources, there was a time a while ago, and I think it was in RIPE. I was told that transfers were only possible if the resources were not in use. So you had to check that they weren't being routed in the routing table. is that motivation for 8.3 transfers affected in your procedures? Do you try to make sure that the resources being transferred aren't in the routing table?
We do check, like we do everything, but sometimes they're actually being used by the recipient organization already, because sometimes it's a subsidiary of the organization doing the transfer, and
Okay.
there's some circumstances but we do check routing. Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Yes, Elvis.
Hi. Is the inter-ARIN transfer policy that the NCC has just announced to start implementing, and they said that they expect to have it implemented somewhere by August, I think.
I think that's what we heard too.
Is that policy compatible with the ARIN inter-ARIN?
Yes, it
transfer
is.
policy? So it is.
Absolutely. We've made public statements to that effect.
Thanks.
Yep, we anticipate getting our first inter-ARIN transfers from them soon. Okay, so I completely forgot where I was, so let me just revisit this, because, let's see. No dispute, did I go over the source? I did. Recipient, oh yeah, and I went over the recipient too, so I think I'm ready to move on to the next slide, right? Okay. Inter-ARIN transfers. Oh yeah, I even started this one. God, sorry guys. Must have reciprocal, compatible needs-based policies, currently APNIC, soon to be ripe. Transfers from ARIN, going to another RIR region. It says that the source cannot have received IPv4 from ARIN for 12 months prior to the transfer, or receive IPv4 for 12 months after the transfer. It's that same anti-flipping measure that's in the 8.3 transfer policy. The source must be the legitimate holder of the space, and again, we will vet that and ensure that, and that is also very similar to the 8.3 transfer policy. And then the recipient must meet the destination RIR's policies. Transfers coming into ARIN, basically the recipient must meet ARIN policies, so we'll do that verification. We haven't had one yet, but we anticipate them. So, using that specified transfer listing service that I mentioned, STLS for short, it is a voluntary service, and it's intended to facilitate specified transfers, those market-based transfers. It is a service that ARIN offers. A couple of things about it. First, I'm going to just talk about this. So there's 3 ways to get on this list. You can be a lister and have IPv4 address space available. Or you can be a needer. It's actually says in the STLS a seeker, but that's too Harry Potterish for me, so I went back to needer, sorry. And those are for people looking for IPv4 addresses. And in order to get on the list as a needer, you have to be pre-approved under ARIN policy. So this is one way to get pre-approved, and you know exactly how much you qualify for. And then there's the facilitators, and these are your IPv4 brokers. And they're available to help listers and needers find each other. We have 12 facilitators listed to date, actually, on our service. So the thing about this is all of these participants have access to each other's information. Once you're in the club, the STLS club, you can see each other's information. But the thing about the facilitators is they are actually listed publicly on the website, so you can see who the IPv4 brokers are, and that's the only, or the facilitators are. That's the only one that's actually listed publicly for all to view. There is a public summary provided, but it's very sort of innocuous. It just lists the number of available blocks, the number of blocks that people have listed as available, and then the number of IPv4 blocks that are needed. So that's really all it's listing, no real detail. Preapprovals for specified transfers. So this is our new service, and we are doing preapprovals. Just not through STLS. You don't have to be involved in STLS at all. You can just come in and say, I want to know how much I qualify for, so I can go find some space from somebody. So you come in and you get pre-approved. Again, it's based on a 24-month need. So we do the pre-approval on the 24-month need, and it is valid for the full 2 years. You're not subject to re-verification within that time frame. So once you're approved and on the list, you're approved until you find that space. Obviously, you have to meet current ARIN policy in order to be pre-approved. And the way to access this is through your ARIN Online account. So you have to have an ARIN Online account. And you do this via the Transfer Resources button. It's right there when you log in. You can hit Transfer Resources, and you'll see your options for pre-approval. question, Sandra?
Yeah, just a quick question. One of the problems we've had is with the pre-approval mechanism. Sometimes companies don't want to be listed on the public service.
Absolutely.
And there didn't used to be a mechanism to avoid being listed.
Right.
So what has happened or is happening with respect to not being listed? And then the other thing that we've been seeing is that sometimes after someone has bought or sold, they don't come off the listing for quite a long time.
Oh, that's
So
interesting.
what's happening with respect to cleanup, maybe is a good way to put it?
That's a good question, and we will actually look at that. I don't know what's happening with cleanup, but we'll go back. Richard and Kathy will go back and look at that. As far as the first question, we actually did, at the request of some of the IPv4 brokers, we changed the STLS to allow people to come in and get pre-approved as a needer without being publicly listed. They would be able to check a box basically in the template. So you didn't have to be listed publicly, but you did initially until we changed that. And with pre-approvals, obviously, you don't get listed publicly at all. It's just something that we know and you know. Did that answer it?
Yeah, I'm not sure it always works because we've had a couple that have requested not to be listed, and either they're making a mistake and not
Oh, okay. So they're still going through STLS. Okay, they're still going through the STLS and they're wanting to be a needer and they get listed publicly because they don't click something. Okay, that's interesting. Just have them contact RSD. They will certainly rectify that. Okay. Let's talk about tips for faster processing. What can you do to make this whole process go faster? Because it can be slow. I mean, Sandra can attest to that. We've had some of these V4 transfers that took a while because people weren't pre-qualified and they didn't know what they could justify, and it just takes quite a while. We do a lot of vetting. We're pretty thorough with that. So you have to make sure you're applying under the correct transfer policy. First of all, we used to have people applying for merger and acquisition transfers when they really wanted a specified transfer. And so you just have to make sure you got the right one. Make sure that all of the registration information is current and accurate. We have found many times where these source organizations come in to do an 8.3 transfer and they're not the registrant. They're the company that bought the registrant 11 years ago, but they never came to ARIN to update the database. So we are not going to do the transfer until that registration is current and accurate. So we make you do an 8.2 transfer, get your information up to date, and then you can do that specified transfer. We would say involve ARIN as early as possible. Come to us, see what you can qualify for. Make sure that you meet that a contemplated specified transfer meets ARIN's requirements before finalizing it. And again, this is sort of an evolving process. This is fairly new. It's a couple years old. I think in the beginning it was a bit bumpy, and it's gotten progressively better. It's much smoother. They go much faster now, but it's a learning experience for both sides. Use ARIN's STLS or request pre-approval in advance of the transfer. That way you know exactly what you qualify for, and you can tell your source how much space you're actually pre-qualified for. And then this is an important one, and I know RSD really wants to emphasize this. Provide detailed information to support that 24-month need. Just because you tell us you need it doesn't mean we're going to give it to you. Like, we're not going to approve you unless we really know why you need it. What new products and services are you offering? What are you basing your projections on? So we want to know. So as much information as you can provide would be great for us. Yes, Kevin.
Kevin, in regards to your last bullet point, I'm an internet provider, just generically an internet provider, that got space from ARIN in 2010. With the 3-month change that happened a while back, I got extremely, as in whichever company was, got extremely vigilant in terms of its own use, is running up at 98% utilization, hasn't come back to ARIN, it's been years. Goes to ARIN because it now knows that it needs a 24-month supply, is going to go through this process. Does slow start now kick in and you start with the smallest block, which is a /24, and grow them from there, or how do you
Not in the transfers, no, not with 8.3 transfers.
So slow start doesn't apply in 24 months.
It can't. It's a 24-month need. We have to really look at all factors, and we really have to.
So you look at a subscriber current utilization, members' current utilization, and then what their 24-month business plan is, and that's it?
And what they're basing it on. And we also do our own independent verification. A lot of times these are public companies. We can find out, how much money they're making, what they're doing, what their new services are. So we do our homework. We have to have something to justify that 24-month need. But the more you tell us, the better it is.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So let's say you forget all about IPv4, you're not even going there, and you're just going to come in and get IPv6. What do you do? So if you're an ISP, really simple policy. This is the criteria. You have to meet one of these 3 items, not all, just one. And this guarantees you a minimum allocation size of a /32 or /36 if you want it, but most people take the 32s. So have a previous IPv4 allocation from ARIN or a predecessor registry, or intend to multi-home, or provide a technical justification that details how you're going to make 50 assignments within the next 5 years. So any one of those 3 will do it, doesn't need to be all of them, and you immediately get your space. This policy was made simple in order to have more people qualify. What data will ARIN typically ask for? Well, we're only going to ask for data if you're requesting larger than a 32. We're going to ask you to give us a spreadsheet or a text file and tell us the number of serving sites that you have, and that's a POP or a data center, and that's defined in the policy, actually. The number of customers served by your largest serving site, and then the block size that you plan on assigning to all of these customers. I wrote /48 as typical, but we actually still see a lot of people assigning 56s and 64s, and that's, depends on the service they're providing. So we do see that. So you're an end user and you want to come in and get the space. What's the criteria? It's very similar, very simple. Again, meet one of these 4, not all of 4, just one. Have a v4 direct assignment from ARIN or a predecessor registry, or intend to multi-home, or show how you will use 2,000 IPv6 addresses or 200 IPv6 subnets within a year. Or give us technical justification as to why provider-assigned IPs are not suitable. I actually haven't seen that one before, but there'll be a first. What data, so anyway, minimum allocation, a minimum assignment size is /48, so if you meet one of those, you get your /48. If you want more than 48, we're going to ask you for a little more information, so we'll ask you for a spreadsheet or a text file. And we'll ask you to list the number of sites in your network, and a site is defined as having a distinct geographic location, and we want the street address for each one. It actually says in the policy, I think, that a campus can count as multiple sites, and that's a university campus or a business campus, a campus. And you'll just have to provide us technical justification showing how they're configured like geographically separate sites in order to be counted as separate sites. And that is that for now. I'm going to do the summary. Can I finish, or do you need a question now?
I actually had one on the previous slide.
Okay.
As I recall, and correct me if I'm completely off base here, but a site, as I remember the policy, is defined as a single building or structure or tenant within a multi-tenant building or structure.
I don't think so. Is it?
That's the language. But that's, for a slide, that's a pretty reasonable summary of that to put on a slide.
Right. This is the high-level slide thing. If you want the details, we'll talk later. But yeah. Yeah.
That would be a paragraph on that slide.
It would be. The policy is pages. I mean, it's really long and really detailed. So I was trying to make it easy on you. Okay, so in summary, what have we talked about? This is the tutorial part. Summary. ARIN will deplete its IPv4 available pool sometime this year. That's an absolute fact. There are still ways to obtain IPv4 address space. There are now, and there likely will be once we hit 0. And that is because space will come back to ARIN. It will continue to come back. I don't know how much, but we will get space. And that will be through returns, revocations, reclamations, and IANA distributions into our free pool. We also have space in the special use policies, and that is the reserve 10 for V6 facilitation, and the reserve /16 for microallocations, which could increase to a second /16 depending on the outcome of the discussion this week. And then there are the market-based transfers, which is an option and will likely continue to be an option for quite some time. And lastly, IPv6 is abundant. It's easy to qualify for. Come get it. That's the message. And that's all I have. Are there any more questions?
Sandy Murphy, Parsons. The discussions, the slides that you had about the process for transfers and pre-allocation and a 24-month supply and all those details seem to be focused on the 8.3 transfers. For inter-RIR transfers, those probably apply if the resources are being transferred into ARIN. What, do you have any clue what you're going to do with inter-RIR transfers for transfers out of ARIN?
All of our inter-RIR transfers are out of ARIN.
Well,
That's-
I mean, yeah.
That's all we've
within-
had so far.
Right.
I have it right here, and I did
Right.
kind of talk about it, yeah. We don't know, we haven't had one come into ARIN yet, so we actually haven't had to qualify someone for one of those yet. So we haven't actually reversed the process yet, but we will. I'm sure we will soon, but
Okay,
right
All
now,
right.
we haven't.
thanks.
You're welcome. Any more questions? Okay, thank you guys for coming on this sunny day.